we've got a set format, and we're going to have a presentation. The three of us will take part in that. If you've questions as that presentation goes on, please use the chat or put your hand up. And with that, I'll hand over to Angelica.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angelica. I'm in the UK. I've walked the Camino several times, plentiful. And I also like photography and black and white photography, which is why you're going to see a lot of photos today in black and white. Okay. As for what we're going to be talking about today, a little bit of history. How did the Camino start? Why do people do it? How to be a pilgrim and the preparation. Then a few, I think, thinking or milestones, points to make you think a little bit about the whole journey, like trust, how much trust matters in doing the Camino, and respect as well. Walking, what is it about? The beauty and the mystery you're going to encounter. Ultimately, the arriving and more. And then some more practical things. We're going to be talking about what is a typical day like on the Camino. And one thing I think we want to point out here, we tell you about our experience and our thoughts and ideas, but please remember, when you set off, you will need to make your own decisions. We can give you any advice, but it's based on our own, and it's always up to you to make it your own. Okay, so let's start. Anne, do you want to?
So good morning, good afternoon. Hello, I'm here in Michigan. Actually, when we talk about the roads that lead to Santiago, I'm always reminded of the medieval pilgrims that started at their doorstep. So the road actually begins, I like to think, when you decide you want to go. It's not when you arrive at the airport in Madrid or Paris or wherever you pick your starting place, but it's when you have it in your mind, I have to do this, I need to do this, I want to do this. That's when the road starts. There's a lot of misconceptions that the road is actually one, and it's 500 miles and it's 5 weeks and you have to only do one way. But Angelica's map gives you a sense, the road starts everywhere. You can see that there are many routes in Spain that you can choose. There are many routes across France, certainly. You can even start in England and find your way to northern Spain or to northern France and make your way that way. You can come from Germany, certainly. I met a pilgrim who walked from Jerusalem. So the Camino is pretty much just as the slide says, all roads are leading to Santiago. Everyone wants to go there, everyone needs to go there, and everyone starts at their doorstep.
Yeah, so when somebody says they walk the Camino, and basically you always have to ask which one you mean, right?
Exactly. You know, I've walked the English route, which is north to south. I've done the Portuguese route, which is south to north. I've done the Primitivo, which sort of diagonals across, and I've also done the Camino Frances, which sort of slices across to northern Spain. But there are many, many ways to get there.
And we would say to everyone, there is no one route which is more important than the other. And
True.
Just consider carefully. You know, I was a bit naive when I walked my first route. I read on a website, now this was in 2007, the Camino Frances is getting very busy. We recommend that new pilgrims consider another route. Now, I was completely naive, so I picked the Via de la Plata. I soon realized as I was going up very steep hills that it was challenging. So consider carefully the route that you want to walk, and there's nothing right and there's nothing wrong. In the same way as during this session, there are no stupid or naive questions. If you've got a question, feel comfortable asking it. Thank you.
All right, John, you might as well just carry on with the history of the route, the whole story and everything.
Oh, well, not the whole story. You'll be relieved to know not the whole story.
Fast forward.
but to understand the present Camino, it's helpful to understand a bit of the history. And whilst a lot of this is disputed by academics, there is some agreement. And there is a literary tradition from the early centuries describing the role of St. James preaching the gospel in the Iberian Peninsula, not just in Spain, but in Spain and in Portugal. Now, also, the legend has it that he returned to Jerusalem after preaching in the Iberian Peninsula, and he was martyred, he was beheaded. And his supporters, the story is, says that his body was transported back to Galicia, to Santiago eventually, in a stone boat. Now, current theorists, that's very hard for us to believe, a stone boat. One of the lyricists said, assisted by angels and the wind. But of course, nowadays academics are saying, well, stone was also transported in boats in these days, and so his body might have been transported in a boat delivering stone. The site of the tomb, the tomb was discovered by a hermit called Paleo, who saw a star in the sky. This is very redolent of the Christmas story. He saw a star in the sky, and where the star was shining down, he looked in the ground and realized this was the burial place of something very important, dug up the bones of St. James and two of his supporters. Now, we don't know whether that's true or not, but that is the legend and appeared in writings from very early in the centuries. The Catholic Church did authenticate the relics and said that these were the bones of St. James, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And at that time, the first Archbishop of Santiago was appointed, and the second Archbishop, a man called Gelmirez. You know, yesterday I was speaking to a group from a university in America, a group of students studying entrepreneurship, and we would say that Archbishop Gelmirez is the first entrepreneur. He saw, his vision was that Santiago could be as important, the bones of St. James could be as important as Jerusalem and as Rome. And so he set about constructing the cathedral and making the Camino better known. And so in jig time, as we would say, pilgrims started arriving in the city, and very shortly arriving from all over Europe. And you know, at that time in the Middle Ages, the very early Middle Ages, the consciousness in the Catholic Church was the need for forgiveness of sin, spend time in purgatory to purify your sins, and that was the way to get to heaven. And of course, people very quickly said, if we walk the Camino to Santiago and we get the indulgence, because the Pope then declared the concept of the Holy Year, we will be allowed out of purgatory and into heaven. And a network, the Cluny monasteries, principally the religious order, started to provide shelters for pilgrims along the way. And as we know in modern times, if you build an albergue, the pilgrims will come. And that's exactly what happened in these days. So after several centuries, for a whole number of reasons, then we're just the pandemic, the recent pandemic, totally closed down the Camino. And that the same thing happened, not quite as suddenly in the Middle Ages, but after several centuries, numbers started to dwindle through war, through the Black Death sweeping across Europe. And of course, by this time, the indulgences that the Catholic Church, that you can have in the Catholic Church to get out of purgatory and into heaven, the Catholic Church started selling these. And of course, the Reformation started because of Protestantism's real protesting against the concept that you could buy your way into heaven. And so the number of pilgrims fell away. Pilgrims always came to Santiago until the yellow arrows were painted and there was a great revival in the 20th century.
Which is now where we are, looking at the pilgrimage in modern times, where people of all faiths or none walk the miles to Santiago with a huge variety of motives, right? Yeah. But to be a pilgrim, so I think there's loads of definitions out there, right? What's a pilgrim? So to keep it simple, a pilgrim is a person traveling to a sacred space, something that brings you in a relationship with what is greater or more expansive than yourself, a place that moves you, a place to dream about. And then in the case of the pilgrimage, the journey has become the destination in more modern times. The relics are no longer the main motivation for doing the pilgrimage as it stands. And then when you become a pilgrim and you look at 3 pilgrims in the photo, setting out, so actually setting out on the Via della Plata, if I remember correctly, John?
Yes, from Seville Cathedral.
Exactly. So in the picture, as you can see, we're setting out on the physical journey to become like strangers, crossing a country or crossing a region, to move towards a destination. And it's also a way of living, or it becomes a way of living, the time you spend en route and thinking. But importantly, it requires preparation for anybody setting out. And you see here a few websites. John, you want to talk a little bit about the typical?
There are lots of resources available, and please don't be frightened if some of these websites are in Spanish. Use a browser where you can translate. Gruns, for example, Gruns has lists of accommodation and maps for every single Camino, and it's a fantastic resource. And if you're looking at the Camino Francés or the Via della Plata, the Camino Portugués, the website, go to salco.com, has a thing called a planificador, where you can put in your starting point, your ending point, and you can look at all the stages and the different mileages and where there's accommodation. And you can begin to, in your head, shape the pilgrimage. And of course, there are a number of apps around. I'm particularly fond of the Wise Pilgrim app. I think it's an excellent resource. And Michael, the Wise Pilgrim, keeps it well up to date. But there's also Buen Camino. And of course, my old friend, John Brierley, I was doing a Zoom session with him last week, has updated all his guidebooks, and they're about the best there is around. And of course, there are the many Facebook groups. Join a Facebook group. There are plenty of them. Ask your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Anne, which app do you use? I think Wise Pilgrim as well.
Wise Pilgrim. I love it because instead of breaking the pilgrimage out into little bits and chunks, like do it this day and then day 2 and day 3, it gives you a broad sweep of the route. And then you can just go from bed to bed. You can say, okay, today I'm a little tired. I did a lot yesterday. I think I only want to go maybe 10 or 15 kilometers. So you look at Wise Pilgrim and you go, okay, 10 kilometers out, there's these accommodations. 15 kilometers out, there's these accommodations. If I want to go further, how much further do I have to go? Do I have to go 6 or 7? I might want to stop. Or maybe that's only 2 and maybe I will go a little further. That's what I love about Wise Pilgrim. And the other thing is that there's a wonderful map that if you get lost or think you missed an arrow, and that can happen to the most experienced pilgrims, you can look on the map and it'll show you, here's the Camino, and here you are blinking on it or not on it. And you can see how to get on it.
Okay. And may I say, I've prepared a little guide, but it's quite a substantial guide, preparing for the Camino. This particular copy is preparing for the Camino Francés, with everything about it, the terrain, the distances, packing lists, everything you need to know. And it's a free resource. And it's available in that Facebook group, the All Routes group, but also Angelica's got it on her website, and she'll list these resources at the end of the presentation. Let's go on.
Yeah, all right. Pilgrim symbols. Well, I think most people know about the shell, right? Some people, or most pilgrims, have a shell already on their rucksack before they set out. In the older times, it was a shell you received almost like a proof that you'd done the pilgrimage for the way back when you had to walk back home. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people take a walking stick. Again, I take the modern version of sticks, but a lot of people take wooden sticks. What about you, Anne?
Oh, my black diamond hiking poles. I don't go anywhere without them.
Yeah. And some people, I think, always ask, like, do you need some sticks? Well, it depends. They really help me, in particular for downhill walking. Yeah. But also it stops me having swollen hands, fingers, and walking during the day. And the other thing is, it might come handy. It might come handy when there is dogs or something. Yeah, certainly on the quieter routes occasionally.
And I don't use sticks. I use one walking stick to go up a hill, but I'm not into the two sticks marching along. So
There we go then. Three people, three different.
We're all different. We're all different.
Yeah. The one item though that is, sorry, I have a photo of those sticks some people use. The other item that's super important though is a pilgrim passport, the credencial. So you can order it from the American Association has them, the UK Association has them, the Irish Association has them, but you can often also get them when you start your pilgrimage, say, for example, St. John Peter Paul, or in the larger cities anyhow. Certainly, if you want access to the albergs, you need a pilgrim passport. And if you want to get the latest rule on obtaining the Compostela at the end, you need to have walked the last 100K and you need 2 stamps per day, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. 2 stamps per day in the last 100 kilometers.
All right. So those are the pilgrim symbols. Motivation, as we already said, there is no single reason. So unlike the penitential, John, you really pointed out that the Middle Age was all about sin, right? And relics. We now have nowadays all sorts of reasons, religious, spiritual, could be a challenge, holiday. And there's still, in some countries, it's used as an opportunity for younger people. I think the Belgium still run that, where a young person can use it as an opportunity to walk for several weeks. And when they have committed a crime and so on, they get looked after. So when they come back and get through this, they actually get their slate wiped clean. But I think it's only in Belgium that's where that still happens. So a right mixture of motivations. Now, I think all of us would agree with this, right? Some aspects about the pilgrimage, like trust and respect. And I think the Camino, if you come with an open heart and mind, let yourself be surprised, you can have a great experience. Is that right, John? Anne?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think, I think the most important thing to put in your rucksack is an open mind. Just accept what comes towards you, and you will be astonished at the things that will happen. I truly believe that. And I've written about this. I've got a great litany of it doesn't matter if you send your luggage forward. It doesn't matter if you get a bus from time to time. It doesn't matter if you do this. It doesn't matter if you do that. It doesn't matter if you carry your rucksack every step of the way. What matters is that you walk the Camino and you treat it with respect. You treat the Camino and its traditions with respect, and you walk with an open mind. I think that's what's the most important. And there's no such thing as a good pilgrim and a better pilgrim. We're all pilgrims and we're all equal.
No, and I tell people it really is about having a chance to venerate the relics of the saint, and that ultimately you need to get to that church any way you can. And I hate people who say, oh, it's too much time, or I can't walk that far. You'll find a way, and it's all in the planning, and it's all completely legitimate.
And it's all about trusting lots of things, right? So like, for example, waymarks, they're there. So you got to trust that you find the way. Of course, we have the apps that tell you where you are to get you out of a hole should you have missed the waymark. But hey, it's just like a secret code all across Europe. There are waymarks that lead you all the way there. It's actually really amazing.
Well, this astonished me, and this was in 2007. I was in Seville, and I wanted to walk the Via de la Plata from Seville to Santiago. And then I went to the cathedral. I looked down on the ground. There was an arrow pointing across the road. Across the road, there was another arrow pointing right. I followed that. And there was another arrow pointing left. And I followed yellow arrows for 36 days. Now, people are worried, what happens if I get lost? Now, we've all got a bit lost because you could be preoccupied and not notice the arrow, or there could be a car parked in front of an arrow and you don't see it. The general rule is, if within 10 to 15 minutes you don't see another arrow, go back to the last arrow that you know was there and follow its direction. That's what I do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's also trust. So you most likely, especially on the Camino Frances or any of those popular routes, you're meeting other people. And when you meet people, or on some routes, you actually even get invited into people's houses. There has to be a mutual trust in humanity and other people. And that follows to have respect. So the trust is that you encounter people, you won't be on your own, sharing conversations, sharing meals. I think that's a super important one. And of course, every little word of the language you can speak, or any language you can speak for that matter, not just Spanish, helps with all of this.
Well, Angelica, you've listed all of this, and funnily enough, Chip Fraser has sent round a wee thing on the chat saying over the last 1,000 years, the Camino seems to become more about the destination than the journey, and he thinks that that's sad. But just as you've listed that, staying with the locals, trusting in encounters, sharing conversation, meeting friends that become your companions along the way. I see on this list today, there's a lady called Linda Piso. Linda, I think your camera's off because you're painting your house. But Linda and I met years ago on the Camino Inglés, and we're still friends. And I will see her the next time she comes to Santiago. And I've got many friends like that. And that's the bedrock of our Camino experience, our interaction with other people. There's Linda showing her paintbrush there in her house. Hi, Linda.
Hey, John, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for being there. Go on with the painting now.
Thank you.
Let's move on.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
but I also tell people there's no better resource than the people. You can have all the guidebooks in the world. You can have apps that just completely clutter your phone, but there's no better resource than the people. And you're going to find this over and over and over. You're going to stand on a street corner and look lost, and someone will come up to you and say, how can I help you? And that's amazing.
It's totally amazing. I mean, this photo is actually taken in the guy on the right here. If you were staying in his house, he would let people, strangers, stay in his house. And that takes a shed load of trust to have that. And equally as a person staying with somebody you don't know. So to be honest, it's like rediscovering humanity in some instances. Yeah. But the other point, and what you just said is super important. So instead of writing on a Facebook group, like I'm just in Astorga, what's the best restaurant? Ask people locally. They can tell you, have that experience, have that encounter, right? And every word of Spanish you can learn will help. Of course, you can get by without, but it's so much more enriching if you can speak a little bit more. Respect. I think I put this one in because recently there have been a few reports about rubbish and so on. I think it's really important. We come to Spain, we are guests in the country. The Camino is there for us. It's been there for centuries. So respect it. Respect the local customs. Respect the nature. Respect everything. Also respect that people provide accommodation, and often or sometimes there is still accommodation that's where they expect a donativo. Okay, respect it, because donativo doesn't mean free. Donativo means you give what you can so they can continue to provide hospitality for the next people that come in after you. So I think trust and respect go hand in hand. John, anything you want to add there?
Nothing.
Oof, nothing.
Nothing to add.
The usual one. Yeah. And I was just making that point with the donativo. So what we show each other, people to people, that's what the Camino is about. I think that gets passed on further down the line. If we give trust, help, support people, it pays off. Okay. Also trust that you find somewhere to stay and a bed for the night. I think the photo is actually quite a few years old, and on that occasion, this was in France. The local inn was full, let's put it this way, but we were put up in the local gym in a municipal hall, and they even brought us a coffee machine. And the amazing thing is always that you are somewhere super basic, but you can download the latest from your mobile phone. So this is mixture of modern, and yet it was sufficient to have a bed for the night. I think a lot of people are worried at the moment with the Caminos being so busy that they find somewhere or not. So I guess one of the questions that are coming through perhaps are like, is it advisable to book somewhere, or is it still okay to go on spec? What's the latest from Santiago there, John?
I haven't heard of anyone not getting a bed, and the numbers are 40% more than they were in the last Holy Year. Walk with confidence, and once your boots are on the ground and you're talking to other people, and you're talking to hospitaleros, or you're talking to the hotel reception, you know what's coming up, and you can look ahead. And if you're nervous about not getting a bed, that's the time to book. But you will soon be able to tell if there's a big group of people in front of you or whatever.
And on your point earlier on about the Wise Pilgrim app, you said you can plan the stages better there to avoid perhaps the typical stages.
Yes, absolutely. I avoid the typical stages any chance I get. I will go, like I said, from bed to bed. You can scan down the app and go, you see the little icon of the bunk bed or the bed, whatever. Then you can say, okay, there's a place to stay here, there's a place to stay here, and just ignore the day by day bits and chunks. It's much easier.
Can we just deal with an important question that's coming up? People using apps, but also concerned about looking at Google Maps and so forth if they feel they're lost. No, there is not Wi-Fi available on the Camino out in the countryside. If you don't have a data package, you will not be able to log on to the internet. So that's something that you might consider, buying a simple data package from one of the providers, Vodafone, Movistar, or whatever. But there is Wi-Fi available in almost every bar, cafe, hotel, hostel, albergue along the Camino routes. Thank you.
The other thing is the trust.
30 minutes gone. We need to keep going.
Push on. Okay. The other thing is to trust that you're not alone, walking the only pilgrim in the world out there. I think the photo highlights that very well. That was taken on the Camino Frances one year. I think that question arises a lot, especially from women. Will I be on my own? Will I be okay? Will I be safe? Certainly, I mean, I've walked, I don't know, 10 dozen times, 15 times, sometimes on my own. I have never felt that I wasn't safe as such. Of course, you have to have your common sense about you, but I've never felt in any danger. I think, to be honest, I'd probably be more worried walking on my own at nighttime here in Coventry in the UK. I don't know how you see that, Anne, being also.
Yeah, I walk by myself when I can. I much prefer to walk by myself, and I've never felt unsafe.
Yeah. So I guess that answers the question on that one. Yeah. But talking about staying safe, I think Spain has a super app that I wish other countries had. It's called Alert Cops, and it's in, I can't remember how many languages available. So you can set it on into your language, and you also need a data package, obviously, for that. If you have something to report, John, I think we were together walking actually when you rang them one day on that app, because we spotted the burst water pipe.
Alert Cops is an excellent app issued by the police and the civil authorities in Spain. You register, you give them your telephone number, and you give them your photograph, and it's GPS enabled. They know exactly where you are. If you report something, they can have an ambulance to you, they can send the police to you, or whatever emergency service you need. And might I also mention, for people who are still posting about access to the internet, the national emergency number 112, you do not need a data package. It will, your mobile phone will search out the nearest mobile service, the nearest mobile mast, and they will put your call through. So you don't need your mobile phone charged up or anything. It will do it for you, and they have operators who speak English.
But Alert Cops is a definite one to download. It's fantastic. So it should put a lot of people's mind at rest, I think, that one. So trust, we're still on trust here, and trust your own abilities. You've got to ultimately, you can get there. It might take longer, it might take more rest days to enjoy yourself and stuff, but hey.
And talking about abilities, Angelica, and a question has been asked about how much training should we do before the Camino, and how do you do it? How did you two do it? I built up gradually. I bought my boots, I bought all my gear, I packed my rucksack. I started walking a few miles around Clapham Common in London, where I lived there. Even one day I put on my rain gear and got under the shower in the bathroom. Folk thought I was crazy, of course, but I tried it all out. Training, Anne, what do you think?
Well, when I first walked, I wore my boots to work every day, and I wore them all day, every day. It's how I learned not to use wool socks. My feet were miserable in wool socks. Everybody said, "Oh, you have to have wool socks." Yeah, my feet were miserable. So I tell people to test out your socks as well as your boots. Modern boots typically don't need to be broken in the way the old ones did. But I had the benefit of being a New Yorker in those days, so that I walked anywhere and everywhere all the time. So I was accustomed and used to walking. But I tell people, if you can walk to the store, you can do this.
Although I would say it certainly pays off to have trained with the rucksack in advance. If you see, everybody can just do something for a day, but this at the weekend, do a Saturday and a Sunday walk to get a little bit more what it's like to get up the next day and walk more. I think that's probably the biggest experience. Because it's day after day after day. That's, I think, sometimes when the body goes on strike. Yeah. And once more, I would never say. I think it's definitely some training is needed, but it doesn't need to be like 20-mile walks or anything. Just like you did, John. Just every so often go out 2 or 3 times a week for short walks. That's and then build up at the weekends.
And then I started walking to the office and stuff. So, but yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this, I'll be very honest with you. I had done a lot of training, but still when I started walking, I got blisters. And I was just surprised at this because I was walking day after day after day. Some people get them, some people don't. And whilst we're on this, could we just answer a question about lots of people are concerned about stray dogs and dogs that will nip at their ankles and so forth. Linda's asking, is it okay to take a dog whistle that the dogs can hear, but humans can't? I would say, take whatever you're comfortable with and whatever works. I take my stick, but in saying all of that, I don't know. I've walked over 50 Caminos and I've never had a problem with dogs. Once or twice, I've been a bit frightened by dogs barking near me, but as I've kept walking, they've left me alone.
I have more of a problem with dog owners. The dog owners drive me nuts. Oh, he's friendly. Don't worry. I said, I'm sorry. I don't really want to do a dog right now.
Yes.
I think in the main routes, there's no problem in Spain. The dogs are used to it. And in fact, they would endanger their being fed with by people passing by if they were aggressive. I think in the remote routes, I have seen dogs, guarding sheep, the mastins. I think most of them keep their distance unless you come really close. So generally not a problem. Yeah.
No, hang on. Let's see the confidence of our presenters. Lisa wants to know, how old were you when you walked the Camino?
The first one.
Yes.
38.
There we go.
I was also 58.
And I was 54. Chip Fraser was 69 and he's still walking. So there we go. Let's go on.
Simplicity. Everything in one rucksack. Yeah, okay. I think luggage and rucksack or not a rucksack seem to be, of course, there's transport option available. My first Camino, it wasn't, so you had to carry your kit. And sometimes probably easier to say, let's just transport it every day. So obviously that comes with a cost. I just think sometimes there's one aspect to it that people might overlook, because I think one of the best experiences, certainly my first Camino, and lots of people I speak to is the same, this feeling of, I have everything in a rucksack, life is so much easier, it's liberating. I don't have to worry, I just have what I have, end of the story. And I think sometimes it's easily overlooked if you transport your luggage, how liberating it can be. and how much actually you can pick up from that for life later to travel easy. I would just say it might be an idea to make that experience of walking the Camino probably more enriching, or it's certainly something to think about. And if you look at the rucksack as a metaphor for life, I mean, who wants to carry lots of stuff you don't need, problems on your back, right? And then I picked up in one book the phrase of weight is fear, and I was a bit like, okay. But that also had looked at it a bit like, so you open somebody's rucksack and out come all their fears in life. It's like either I'm afraid of the cold, I'm afraid of the heat, I'm afraid of starving to death when I walk all day, or all those things. Or I've come across pilgrims carrying a rucksack with a hairdryer, and I need more clothes for the evening. So what's the fear? I need to look good. Actually, walking the Camino is that's you. Everybody is good enough. We don't need to dress up or anything. So that's my bit about simplicity. Anything to add there?
No, it sounds
Carry your
good.
kit too?
Yes, yes. I walk in the winter and the options for baggage transport are very few.
But simplicity is also obviously the walking, when you put one step in front of the other, okay? But the Camino offers also plenty of opportunities for simple joys in life, like finding a bench at lunchtime, yeah? And then walking itself, I think it's recently in a lot more articles how good walking is for mental health and so on. It's the slowest form of travel. I think it's because the brain, the mind, everything can sort of go along, and the speed is not too fast. Yeah? But of course, everything comes with challenges. And yes, there are a few. But I think we all learn to take them in our stride. And yes, aches and blisters are a bit of a potentially a challenge, like John already said. He got some. I think I can only say some years I never get a blister, and then the next walk you get plenty. So it varies, right?
People say listen to your body, and there couldn't be a better piece of
Yeah.
advice.
It is.
Keep walking. If you're in pain, you need to stop and rest. Pain is not inevitable, Chip.
It's not.
It's
And
not,
that's the weight
not
comes with it as well.
inevitable. Take your time, slow down. If you, and you know, your feet are the best commodity, the best tools for the Camino. And look after them, rest them. If you feel a hot spot developing, stop. I'm a great believer, as is Anne Bourne, in applying tape, just simple paper tape, like micropore. If that hot spot starts to sting, you've already got a blister. So pay attention to it beforehand. What's the best time of year to walk? Lisa's asking. Well, it depends, like everything else. If you would like solitary walking or quiet walking, start in the winter time. Start in January, February, or March. I'm a great winter walker, as is Anne Bourne. If you're looking for very, if you can tolerate hot weather because you come from Florida or the Caribbean or wherever else, walk in July and August. It's very hot then. September, October, and November are lovely months to walk. Although as you enter Galicia, from wherever you're walking, there can always be rain. I mean, like we rained this morning in Santiago, and now the sun's shining. So let's go on.
Yeah, because we're on a pilgrimage and not necessarily like the most exciting, beautiful route in the world, you do come across stretches that might be more monotonous than others. But that's something, like I say, you're walking with a purpose, you have a destination. So it's trying to get there, okay? And as John said, the weather, but the weather is never right? So it can be too hot, too wet, too windy, too cold, whichever. And partially, obviously, depends where you walk. I mean, too hot, if you did the Via della Plata in July, August, now that would really be probably extremely hot, something to avoid. But Galicia could also always be a bit wet, I guess, but then it's never that extreme on the temperature. I think we had the dog question already, right? Challenges, things that move.
Pass on.
Yeah. Technology. I think it's probably just, it's a slippery slope, right? We all have the ups beneath them, but then you can easily get sidetracked with Facebook, posting photos here, there, and everywhere, and not engaged with what's in front of you, with talking to people you meet, and so on. I don't know, do you use your mobile much en route, John, Anne?
I take photos.
Mm.
Yes, I use my phone for everything. I like people to be able to get in touch with me. I like to let people know how I'm doing. I certainly don't use it all the time. You know, I'm a guidebook writer. Well, I've kind of stopped that now, but I was on the Camino once, and there was a lad was using my guidebook. I saw him ahead of me, and I got a text message from him. He took ages to send this text message. I was looking at him, typing into his telephone, and he said to me, I'm in Betanzos on the Camino list, and I'm lost. I can't see the yellow arrows. And I wrote back to him, you can't see the yellow arrows because you're typing into your phone. Look onto the pavement, it's in front of you. And it was. So
I think that sums it up the best way about the use of the mobile, right? Yeah. I think one of the bigger challenges is the self, because there will be a day when it's more difficult than other days. It could be hot, windy, or whatever. So again, have trust in your own abilities, you get through, but listen to your body at the same time. Yeah. I think I'm just going to go through these slides quickly. Camino is also a beauty and mystery, just something we cannot grasp. So I'm just going to show a few slides there. The small things, the super spaces, quiet moments. Well, when it all comes together, nature and sun and reflection. I also think beauty is in moments with others. These encounters we've already mentioned several times, meet people and enjoy that time with them. Yeah. Then, of course, the thing you probably, I think it was for me the first time, it was trepidation to arrive finally in Santiago. So it's a joyful moment, but also like, oh, the walking is going to stop soon. So you get there, and then you have the cathedral to look forward to. And Anne, this is your stuff.
So this is the end game. This is why we do it. This is where we're going. As much as I have walked the Camino in stretches, like I'll go from Burgos to León or Roncesvalles to Burgos and then come back and walk it in chunks, it's because I've been to the cathedral many, many, many times. And I always caution people, do not plan to arrive and then take off the next day. Plan some downtime in the city. It's a magnificent city. You're going to see this beautiful, beautiful building. You can see on the left a little bit of an idea of what medieval pilgrims would have seen, and on the right, what you're going to see when you get there now. You can show the next slide. What I tell people is that a pilgrimage is in three parts. It's definitely the journey. It's most definitely the destination, but it's also being in the company of like-minded people, like-minded travelers. And you can see in that small slide, the small photo on the left, that's the entrance to the church. And I can tell you there are very few churches that I've ever been to where you enter the church on the left or the right or the side. You don't go in the back the way you do typically other churches. There are two central entrances and they're on either side. They're not the front or the back as the church is laid out on the inside. But where do you start? You pay your respects to the saint in the crypt below the main altar. And then you can sit in front of the main altar, which is the photo on the right, which is absolutely stunning. It's completely covered with Baroque gold and Mexican silver. Next. Then you take a quick tour. You can walk around the building. You'll light a candle for the people that have been worried about you, or someone that you care about, or someone that you know who is ill or is suffering. You can visit the chapels. The chapels are marvelous, and there's over a dozen of them, and each one is more beautiful than the other. And while you're in one of the chapels, one of the beautiful things of the current renovation is that they've turned the chapels over into places where you can receive the sacrament of penance, and a priest will hear your confession in many, many languages. And outside the chapels where the priests are posted will be a sign there. We'll hear your confession in French or in German or in English or in Portuguese, whatever whatever works. And then if you're lucky, you may see the Botafumero. The Botafumero is this magnificent silver 19th century incense burner that is about half the size of a grown man. It's big, it's heavy, it's amazing, and it will swing to the ceiling of the cathedral. Sadly, it is not done every Mass. It is not, they used to have a thing where they did it every Friday night at Mass, but they got rid of that. Tour groups will pay for it, and on major holidays you will see it. But I will tell you, I was in the cathedral on the Feast of St. James last year, and I went to 3 Masses and didn't see it. So just consider this a kind of a crapshoot. If you're lucky, you might win a chance to see the Botafumero.
And the cathedral is never going to announce when the Botafumero is on.
No, they don't. They don't. And you can sit there.
Their view is that people should go to church to pray, not to see the Botafumero. So they just have a policy of not announcing it.
No, and in fact, if you're there, they will tell you before they swing the damn thing. Don't think of this as a tourist, event. This is our prayers being lifted in the smoke, blah blah blah. And they're very forthright about telling people it's, I mean, everybody's standing there with their phone, right? But it really is a beautiful part of the ceremony. And actually, before the Christmas Mass that I went to last year, they swung the Botafumero before Mass started, which really stunned me. So then what you want to do is you want to see the town. Santiago de Compostela is a marvelous town. It's not actually a medieval town. The buildings are mostly Renaissance era. Some are a little bit older than others. A good bit of it went up in the 17th and 18th centuries as the pilgrimage picked up steam. But you also should go to the Cathedral Museum. It is outstanding, and you can get tours of the rooftop, and you can learn about much more about the cathedral, which is just a brilliant place to spend time. And just go in there and just take a beat. Just try to decompress just a moment. Ultimately, a pilgrimage is just a sacred space for prayer, and this is the brilliant culmination of that.
There's plenty of other churches in Santiago as well to look at, right?
Yeah, there's some beautiful churches. In fact, the only church in Spain dedicated to the mother of St. James is in Santiago.
Okay, everyone, we're nearing the end of this presentation. And Douglas Frazee has asked a very interesting question. What's our definition of a pilgrim versus a walker? If it's spiritual, can an atheist be a pilgrim? Well, I know lots of atheists who believe there's a spiritual dimension to life, but I'm not going to answer this question. What I'm going to say is anyone who calls themselves a pilgrim is a pilgrim. John Bunyan, the English hymn writer who wrote in the 17th century, in the 1600s, the famous hymn, "To Be a Pilgrim," wrote his first avowed intent to be a pilgrim. So it's about intention. If you intend to be a pilgrim, as far as I'm concerned, you're a pilgrim.
Yeah.
Now, are there any other questions from people? Feel free to unmute, ask your question. And people are asking, is it better to use an agency for accommodation? For example, Camino Ways, Santiago Ways, One Foot Abroad, and so forth. It's up to you. I've used booking.com very successfully. I've also used Camino companies to book an entire Camino for me because I was working and writing a guidebook and I didn't have the time to do it. And that was superb. And I have to say that was superb, a superb experience. It's down to budget and what you want to do, is my view.
But also, once you're booked up, then you lose certain flexibility to decide.
Well, that's good too. If you don't book and you're walking along and you meet some really nice people and you want to go to dinner with them, I'll see them tomorrow, and they're walking on and you have to stop because you're booked in a place, you'll lose contact with them. So you do lose flexibility. Are there places to do laundry? Well, many albergues have now got coin-operated washing machines and dryers, many of them. And of course, hostels and hotels similarly. But the word you're looking for is lavanderia. So you're looking for a lavanderia, and most places of any size have got lavanderias. They've got coin-operated washing machines and dryers.
I'm just going to move on to the section about a typical day, because that might also cover some of the questions from the chat. Yeah. So, shall we go through the routine? So when you arrive in the afternoon, secure a bed, reserve or not. That's one of the questions these days. Change your stages if needed. That's what Anne already said. Stop in smaller places, smaller towns that are not typical stages to have more chances of finding somewhere. Have a shower, wash your kit, look after your feet, check any options for dinner and breakfast, usually useful. Check the way out of town for the next morning, find the first errors. That's a really good one, because I remember once being rather blasé about it, setting off early in the dark and promptly went wrong. Yeah. So always useful. Check also, look at the route for the next day. What are the coffee stops? What are the food options? So if you know you need to walk longer without a break, then plan extra water or extra food as needed. And then enjoy the evening with other pilgrims. Yeah. And then also prepare the rucksack for a quick exit the next morning. And yes, plastic bags do rustle. Some people sleep in their underwear and the t-shirt they're going to wear the next day. I certainly don't do that, but everybody has their own preferences there. Yeah.
And, you know, whether you're staying in albergues and sleeping in the dormitories or in your own hostel, we all have this routine.
Yes.
I truly believe that this sets up a momentum, you know, and within a few days, you'll hardly be able to remember where you started from in the morning as you're arriving at your destination, because you need to find your bed, you need to have a shower, you need to wash your underpants and your socks and so forth. And that's the Camino routine. And in many ways, that's one of the most wonderful things about it.
The simplicity, right? So the next day, put on sunscreen, obviously, when the sun is out. Yeah.
Oh, and I also caution you, if you're going to use poles, put sunscreen on the back of your hands. Learned it from experience.
Yeah. Put it everywhere where the sun can get. True. Grab a breakfast if there's possible in the albergue or in a bar. Then walk and rest. Stop at your planned place, or when you're tired, if you can change your reservation or anything. But if you are stopping somewhere and you had already reserved somewhere else, please cancel. Because there's always some reports you hear that people don't do that, and that blocks other pilgrims. And then the routine starts again. Secure your bed, shower, wash your kit, repeat. Okay. And I think this leads to the question what to pack. And that leads us to probably every questions now. Are there any more questions on that kind of stuff, John?
So I think we're at the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
In the planning for your Camino free guide that I produced, what you can download on Facebook or from wherever Angelica tells us we can download it for. It describes, certainly for the Camino Frances, the terrain, the public holidays in Spain, the festivals in the small villages, and there are also packing lists there. And the session is being recorded, Erin, and I will post it over the weekend on Facebook, and you'll be able to access it. Final questions, everyone. Come on, all these questions that you know you want to ask. Either put them in the chat or put your hand up and ask.
Well, there are lots of messages showing in the chat, John. Are they all answered already?
Yes, they're all answered.
All right. Cool.
Get with them all.
I have a final thing to say.
Off you go on.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do this. So many Americans that I talk to, I know, are so used to booking a trip. They book a trip. And I tell them, just buy a plane ticket, find yourself in Spain, figure it out. use your skills, use all of your skills. And then when you think you've used all of your skills, you're going to tap skills you didn't know you had. But do not be afraid to do this.
Absolutely, I second that. And especially some women are always quite nervous about going on their own. No, it does feel, yes, common sense is important, but go for it. Yeah.
Lisa's asking, what's the oldest age that you've walked the Camino? Well, the oldest age is the age I am now. And
Me too.
70 on my last birthday, and I'm walking another Camino this year for 3 weeks, and I'm not going to stop until I stop.
But there are people in their 80s walking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Linda Piso's asking about the dress code for churches in Spain. There is absolutely no dress code for churches in Spain. And the churches along the Camino are very well used to pilgrims in pilgrim gear, including shorts. Of course, just be sensible. But I tell you this, if you've ever been to a Spanish wedding, you'll notice that there is absolutely no rules in modesty in Spanish churches. Can you use Apple Pay at albergues? Apple Pay is increasingly in use. In the albergues, no. In shops and kiosks and so forth, yes. Albergues want cash, really. Some of them will have credit card machines, but if you're using albergues, I would have a reserve of cash. Age doesn't matter, says Carolina. And Nancy, the famous Nancy Reynolds, is reminding us, fear is a natural part of taking something on this big. Don't let fear stop you. And we can assure you that as soon as you're underway, your fears will disappear. Bed bugs. Bed bugs is a very interesting subject. And I was talking to a lassie yesterday who had been badly affected by bed bugs. Erin's giving good advice. If you get bed bugs, put everything in the dryer. No, your pack will not get messed up. Put everything in the dryer. Of course, don't put things in that will be affected by heat. You might have to throw some things out. Wash things thoroughly, put them in the dryer. Base layers of wool. I wouldn't easily put wool, my merino wool base layers in a hot dryer. I would wash them by hand, and I would search the seams thoroughly to make sure. And people are perhaps reluctant to use anti-bug sprays, but there can be a good use for that as well in emergencies. Is there anything else? Now, I've circulated my email address on the general chat, Johnny Walker _Santiago@hotmail.com. You can find me on Facebook all the time. Anne's there as well. Angelica's there. If you've got questions which occur to you after this session or as you prepare for your Camino, and when you're on your Camino, don't hesitate to get in touch with us.
I've put the link showing here, the link to the your documents. So you have the preparation for the Camino. There's also what to do in Santiago available. From that, I guess the recording will show that. I can show it online right now.
I also have some essays and some tips on how to pack and how to walk in the winter if you go to my website, which is tumbleweedpilgrim.com.
Okay, and Jane is asking a final question. Are there more trains available during the summer and fall months? The answer is yes. There is a winter schedule for trains and buses and churches, and there is a summer and autumn schedule. So just take a look at that on the timetables, and remember that the clocks change in Spain. So churches open earlier in the winter time when it gets dark early, and stay open later in the summertime. Thank you all very much for being with us. You know, I do a number of these things on different topics, and usually by the end, we've got half the people that we had at the beginning. This time we've got more people than we had at the beginning. So thank you all very much. And can we say to you, if you're preparing for your Camino this year, all we can say is, buen camino.
Buen camino.
Buen camino.
Bye-bye, everyone.